19. What others say about co-design. The value of the process to participants in the community design process. The Inglewood interviews. Andre Ifrig is a consultant in community development who has worked on community housing in Indonesia for the last 2 years. She has prepared a study of the public participation process conducted in Inglewood community of Calgary, Alberta in May 1987. The case study consists of 4 conversations held with the following resource people: David Marshall, Chairperson, Area Redevelopment Plan Subcommittee, Inglewood Community Association; Lucretia Maldenet, former community school coordinator, Colonel Walker Community School; Peter Chesson, development consultant and long-time participant in the Inglewood Community Association; Philip Duck, city planner, the City of Calgary Planning Department. Each of the conversations was designed to provide the Co-Design Society with feedback about how its design workshop activities were perceived in the Inglewood community. The value to community associations. Andre met first with David Marshall, chairperson of the Inglewood Area Redevelopment Plan ARP subcommittee, to discuss how Co-Design's efforts in organizing workshops in Inglewood had contributed to the community's understanding and participation in contributing to the new plan. Andre, I would be interested in hearing your observations on the effectiveness of the workshop and the follow-up concept plan. How did the community, the ARP subcommittee, and the city benefit from the workshop process? David, let's start with the city first. One of the things the community association has observed is that the city sometimes focuses on different things from those of significance to the community. Planners, for instance, think kids need recreational activities like parks with swings and swimming pools. No one would object to these, but if you examine the results of the school workshop that this co-design ran, you'll see that those are not always what kids identify as priorities. The value of the workshops is that by bringing residents out to contribute to the design of the area, the workshops result in a representative survey of what's important to people in this community. Our experience is that the city tends to be more responsive if open houses are well attended by the community. It demonstrates to the council for what residents regard as important. Widespread support for particular ideas or policies also impresses the city, so if a co-design workshop pulls people out and generates lots of ideas, it's good for our negotiations with the city. And workshops provide a relaxed atmosphere in which planners from the city can meet people in the community while being made aware that Inglewood is more than just a collection of streets and gutters. The workshops are valuable for our committee and the community because they helped us understand the implications of some of our ideas. People's ideas become real when they are drawn up by co-design artists. Everyone has ideas, but their impact is increased when they are visually portrayed. Images also make prioritizing easier. The community association will have to make choices between various development initiatives based on residents' preferences, and the images greatly facilitate that process. Policy implications can also be more easily assessed when the impact of particular zoning ideas have been depicted. Andre, was the preparation of the concept plan useful to the community association? David, Philip Duck from the city suggested that the members of the ARP subcommittee, co-design, and representatives from the planning department meet again for a few days after the workshop to discuss the results. The city paid for co-design's time in reviewing the material and drawing up the plan. The plan was really useful because it related directly to the drawings that come out of the workshop and enabled a committee to appreciate the impact of the various ideas that were generated by residents at the workshop. For instance, an idea for storefront cafes and boutiques will have an impact on parking on 9th Avenue. Zoning regulations may also have to be changed to permit the shops to become established. As part of the concept plan's preparation, our committee went on a street walk with the co-design artists. People on the walk found that as a result of the workshop, they were more attuned to street sounds to anticipating parking problems. Andre, what value did the city realize from the concept plan? David, I think the plan presented the community's ideas in a format that the planning department is familiar with, and that Philip Duck can use immediately to make the city more receptive to our ideas. Andre, how did co-design assist the community association in organizing for the workshop? David, co-design held a dress rehearsal before the workshop so that we understand what would happen and so that any outstanding problems could be resolved. They gave us guidance and made suggestions, but they left the organizing up to us. The thing that impressed us was that co-design didn't pre-select ideas for development, and the artists didn't ridicule or omit ideas from workshop participants. Everyone's ideas were included to make the sample from the workshop as far-ranging as possible. The value for children. In July 1987, Andre met with Lucretia Martinet, the community school coordinator at Colonel Walker Community School in Calgary. She shared her observations on the value of the co-design school workshop with Andre. Andre, what makes this school particularly well suited to holding workshops such as those held by co-design earlier in this year? Lucretia, the school has successfully integrated itself into community life in a way most education institutions never do. For instance, the purpose of the co-design workshops for the kids was to find out the children's impressions of what recreational opportunities were needed in the area. Co-design had been hired by the Community Association in Inglewood to identify residents' priorities for future development initiatives, and the children's workshops were an extension of that process. Andre, How many times did co-design meet with the children? Look later. There were 3 sessions at the school. The first time, Stan King from Co-Design held a workshop with all the children. They produced a big drawing on which everyone worked. Stan asked them to depict their impressions of what usually gets built in cities and then to draw up a wish list of what ought to be built. The big drawing was useful exercise because it showed the children how a city grows. In a second session with Stan, this time held in the art room, each class came in separately and each child was asked to do his or her own drawing based on the wish list drawn up the first session. The children drew pictures of their friends doing things, skateboarding, using a dirt bike facility, playing video games, and prepared with written explanations of the activities depicted. The session gave the kids a sense of ownership in that they contributed to the identification of recreational facilities for the community. Usually kids are ignored, but Stan made them feel that their contributions were important for the development of Inglewood. The drawings and explanations also impressed upon the children the importance of communication skills. They could appreciate that better visual images and descriptions made a greater impact than poor ones. In the final session, held in the gym, the individual drawings were hung and rated by the kids. An evaluation sheet was attached to each drawing and kids were asked to rate the drawing using a number system from 1 to 4. We stressed to the kids beforehand that all the drawings were good but not all could be carried out. A number 1 rating meant that the idea was really good and should be carried out. Number 2 was a good idea that needed more design work. Number 3 for a good idea that looked expensive, and number 4 for good ideas that belonged somewhere else in the city. The drawing with the best ratings was subsequently collected and taken to a larger community gathering for display purposes and discussion. The ARP subcommittee retained the whole collection for future consideration. Andre, what value do you think the sessions had for the city planners and members of the community association who are working on the ARP report for Inglewood? Look later. The children's drawings demonstrated that more recreational facilities are urgently needed in this area. The community association was really impressed by the kids' ideas, many of which hadn't been on the association's own agenda. And it surprised the city planners because many of the kids' ideas were not the sort of recreational activities that planners would advocate. What the drawings showed was that kids in this community needed places to hang out, that without recreational opportunities like video parlors and skateboarding areas, the kids will probably hang out in the city pavements. If the children's priorities are not considered by the city, the planners may discover that their nice designs are destroyed by the kids. Andre, were you pleased with co-design work? Look later. The purpose of the workshops was clear to the children. Stan got everyone to cooperate, even the junior high kids who might have been cynical, and the results were impressive, with the kids conscious of their contribution and the planners and community association of real needs that the kids have. I think that the process was a valuable one and could be used again for other kinds of issues, for instance, for planning recreational opportunities and making development decisions in Inglewood. This school is a good value given its is a good venue given its position within the community. The value in community development. Peter Jessen was a long-time Inglewood resident and participant in the area's community association. He served on the original redevelopment committee that prepared the design brief of 1973 and had experience negotiating with the city. In July 1987, he met with Andre to discuss his perception of community participation and the role of the co-design workshop that had been held that May. Andre, what attracted the community association to the co-design format? Peter, the redevelopment committee was looking for a way to kick off the ARP initiative to encourage people in the community to participate. The co-design process was intended to promote participation, and it gave people a focus through images. Images are better than maps because they are easier for people to understand and they have an immediacy. They make choosing between alternatives easier. Andre, what did the community association get from the workshop that will assisted in its preparation of the ARP report? Peter, the association was searching for positive ideas about how to improve the Inglewood area, in particular local facilities. Co-design emphasized opportunities, not problems, by inviting workshop participants to relate their ideas for community development, for recreational facilities, for commercial streetscape development, for the riverfront. The artists faithfully drew up participants' ideas. The images produced were a starting point for prioritizing choices and considering policies that may be included in the ARP report. The workshop attracted new volunteers to the association too. In the next phase of the ARP report's preparation, the community will be invited to participate in open houses where policy implications and priorities will be examined more closely. The open houses will also help the community association to present a united front to City Council. Co-design's contribution has been to mobilize public interest in the ARP process and generate a lot of good ideas which can now be deliberated by the community and ARP subcommittee. The images are also an effective lobbying tool with the council because the drawings are evidence of community participation as well as powerful representations of what people in this area want their environment to be like. The value to city planners. In 1986, Philip Duck from the City Planning Department asked the Inglewood Community Association to prepare recommendations for a neighborhood development plan as input to the department's preparation of an area redevelopment plan. Andre met with him in June 1987 and asked him about the differences between the planning department's and community associations' roles in the preparation of these plans. Andre, you have remarked that the planning department and community association have different roles to play in the public participation process. Could you distinguish between these? Duck. The city tries to involve communities in the preparation of area redevelopment plans for a variety of reasons. Communities must live with the final results of an ARP. Communities that are involved in ARP planning have a greater sense of ownership in the results, and the city doesn't want to dictate to communities how they should develop. However, our actual involvement in public participation is constrained by legal and practical considerations. Community associations are not similarly restricted. They have a mandate to consider everyone's opinion as part of the process of preparing their preliminary proposals for neighborhood redevelopment plans. In general, the impact of the community's plans on other areas is not an issue, and cost implications for the transportation and infrastructure are not considered. We at the city, however, have to take these issues into account. Let's take the example of Inglewood. The community association will examine all of the drawings and ideas that emerged at the co-design workshop in Inglewood earlier this year. Open houses to encourage public debate of the ideas and images will be held. The planning department can't afford the time to conduct this public participation process itself. Our resources are limited, and it's preferable that the community association be the prime agent in drawing out the participation of local residents. Another example of how community considerations are different from the city's is evident in how the two parties approach the content of workshop drawings. Participants at the co-design workshop specified shale rather than other materials for paths near the riverbank, and the community association will probably recommend these as a result. Inasmuch as the financial responsibility for the workshop's recommendations rests with the city, however, alternatives to those suggested by the workshop participants may have to be considered if shale paths cost too much. Andre, in what ways are planners' information needs different than from those of a community association? Duck. Planners are generally happier with words than the images, perhaps because of their academic training. Planners prefer design data that enable them to efficiently prepare a written report. An unedited collection of drawings from a public workshops is inappropriately packaged data for planners. What this department prefers is a design data in the format of a summary of what the community wants, accompanied by a concept plan and a small selection of the relevant drawings. The plan is an effective communication tool in a dialogue with other civic departments such as transportation. A final report from the community association that summarizes the community's recommendations for redeveloping streetscape and recreational areas and preserving residential districts enables planners in this department to rapidly assess the economic and other implications of the community's suggestions.